They say 40 years is long enough to bury a secret, but Meryl Streep knows some truths only grow heavier with time. For nearly half a century, the most respected woman in Hollywood has guarded her private world with a legendary chill. But at 76, the Ice Queen has finally melted. She isn't reading from a script today. She's revealing the soul-deep connection she shared with Robert Redford, a bond so intense it forced them into a lifetime of mutual silence. From the unscripted intimacy in the tall grass of Kenya to the final emotional verdict she's ready to deliver, we uncover the silent frequency between two icons that the world was never meant to hear. Mary Louise Streep was born in Summit, New Jersey in 1949, raised by a mother who acted as her first and most influential mentor. Her mother told her she was capable of anything if she put her mind to it. In high school, she was the cheerleader and homecoming queen, but her real education happened in private. She took opera lessons at 12, but quit after 4 years because she realized she was singing things she didn't feel. She decided then that her art would only ever be about the truth. The road to the top was a grind. At the Yale School of Drama, Streep worked as a waitress and a typist to pay her tuition, appearing in dozens of plays a year until the exhaustion gave her ulcers. She almost quit acting for law school, but the stage wouldn't let her go. In 1975, she moved to New York and faced the cold reality of Hollywood's obsession with aesthetics. During an audition for King Kong, mogul Dino De Laurentiis looked at her and said in Italian to his son, "This is so ugly. Why did you bring me this?" Streep, who understood Italian perfectly, shot back in his own language, "I'm sorry I'm not as beautiful as I should be, but this is what you get." Her soul was truly forged in the tragedy of John Cazale. They met in 1976 during a production of Measure for Measure and remained inseparable until his death. When Cazale was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, Streep took a stock girlfriend role in The Deer Hunter, specifically so she could remain by his side during his final months of filming. She nursed him through the end, accepting a role in the miniseries Holocaust solely to earn the money needed to pay his staggering medical bills. Winning an Emmy for that role meant nothing to her. The man she loved was gone. By 1979, the industry saw her as a technical marvel, but her peers saw a woman who refused to be bullied. On the set of Kramer vs. Kramer, she clashed violently with Dustin Hoffman. Hoffman, who reportedly hated her guts at the time, once slapped her during a scene to provoke a reaction. Streep didn't break. She demanded the script be rewritten. She refused to play the evil wife the writers had created, insisting on giving the character a human reason for her choices. She won her first Oscar for that performance and, in a move that defined her priorities, famously left the gold statue on the back of a toilet in the ladies' room after her speech. By the 1980s, the industry realized they weren't just dealing with a great mimic, they were dealing with a force of nature. Newsweek slapped her on the cover with a bold headline, "A star for the 80s." Critics noted a primal unease vibrating just beneath her skin. She didn't just play a part. She transmitted a sense of danger that made normal behavior feel like a mask. Her first true test of the decade was The French Lieutenant's Woman. She had to navigate a Victorian drama while playing a modern actress, perfecting a British accent that made the locals do a double take. Yet, despite the accolades, the Ice Queen was still human. She looked at her own reflection and admitted, "I couldn't help wishing that I were more beautiful." But Hollywood didn't need a pageant queen. They needed a chameleon. The summit of her technical powers arrived in 1982 with Sophie's Choice. To play a survivor of Auschwitz, Meryl mastered Polish and German, but the real masterpiece was a single, devastating take. The choice scene, where she's forced to decide which of her children lives and which dies, was filmed once. Just once. Meryl refused to do it again. She said the pain was too exhaustive, too real to ever replicate. Roger Ebert called it the most unaffected and natural performance he could imagine. She took home the Oscar, and while some critics claim she decorporealized herself, the rest of the world saw a woman who had officially become untouchable. She didn't stay in the realm of fiction. In 1983, she became Karen Silkwood, the nuclear whistleblower who died in a suspicious crash. She didn't want to play a myth. She wanted to play a human being. She hunted for every scrap of information, trying to understand her from the inside. It was a clinical, quiet success that proved she could handle the weight of a real life. Then came The African Sun. In 1985, Sidney Pollack was casting Out of Africa. He was skeptical at first, thinking Meryl wasn't sexy enough for the role of Karen Blixen. He even looked at Jane Seymour, but Meryl walked into the room and dismantled his doubts with raw honesty. Pollack later admitted there was no shielding between her and me. The Kenyan sun in 1985 didn't just burn the landscape. It ignited a silent frequency between Meryl Streep and Robert Redford that no script supervisor could have prepared for. During the 101-day shoot in Africa, Meryl and Redford developed an unspoken understanding that bypassed the industry noise. Redford was the first leading man who didn't try to outshine her. He simply stood there and believed in her. The legendary hair-washing scene was the pinnacle of this bond. It was a connection that stayed with her, a standard of artistic respect that she would spend the next 4 decades trying to find again in other partners. The film won Best Picture, and Meryl earned another nod for being at the highest level of acting in film today. By the end of the decade, she was taking accents to the extreme. In Evil Angels, she became Lindy Chamberlain, the Australian mother who famously cried, "The dingo's got my baby." She swept up awards from Cannes to New York, proving she could jump from Italian to Spanish to Australian like she was changing clothes. The early 1990s arrived like a slamming door. Hollywood has always had a ledger of expiration for women, and as Meryl hit 40, the industry began to treat the most talented actress on the planet like a depreciating asset. She saw the scripts thinning out. She realized that in a town obsessed with 16-year-old boys and summer blockbusters, a woman in her prime was a misfit. Meryl didn't retreat. She went on the warpath. She stood at the Screen Actors Guild in 1990 and tore into the industry for downplaying women's worth, both on screen and in the checkbook. She tried to pivot. She leaned into comedies like Postcards from the Edge and Death Becomes Her, trying to show a lighter, more accessible image. But the production of Death Becomes Her was a 7-month slog of special effects and Wicked Witch routines. Meryl hated the mechanics of it. She was allergic to the cosmetics and bored by the CGI. She realized that acting in front of a green screen was like singing in a language she didn't feel. She vowed then and there never to let technology choke the soul out of her performance again. By 1995, the industry was ready to write her obituary. Then Clint Eastwood called for The Bridges of Madison County. Meryl actually disliked the novel, but she recognized a rare opportunity to speak for every woman the industry had deemed past her prime. She gained weight to emulate the voluptuous grace of Sophia Loren and turned a sentimental story into an elegiac masterpiece. It was a $70 million triumph that proved a woman's heart is most interesting when it's been through a few storms. She spent the rest of the decade stripping away the technical mask. In One True Thing, she played a mother dying of cancer with such raw, instinctive honesty that critics who had called her cold and technical were silenced. She wasn't just hitting marks, she was operating on flights of inspiration. By 1999, the Queen had reclaimed her throne. Streep portrayed Roberta Guaspari in the music drama Music of the Heart. She received nominations for an Academy Award, a Golden Globe, and a Screen Actors Guild Award for her performance. The new millennium arrived, and Meryl Streep did the one thing Hollywood's gatekeepers find unforgivable for a woman in her 50s. She became a global box office juggernaut. She kicked off the 2000s by returning to the stage in The Seagull and taking on 4 different roles in the 6-hour epic Angels in America. She was winning Emmys and Golden Globes like they were routine paperwork. But the real explosion happened in 2006. Meryl stepped into the designer heels of Miranda Priestly in The Devil Wears Prada and effectively hijacked the cultural conversation. She turned a demanding fashion editor into a terrifying, imperious portrait of power that made every corporate titan in America look twice. It was her biggest commercial success to date, earning her a record-setting 14th Oscar nomination. She wasn't just a technical marvel anymore. She was a pop culture icon who could sell tickets as fast as she could change accents. In 2007, she starred in his film Lions for Lambs. She crossed paths with Robert Redford one more time. The critics were lukewarm, but for Meryl, it was a return to the silent frequency they had forged in Kenya 20 years earlier. While Redford's performance was called forced by some, Meryl was described as natural, unforced, and quietly powerful. Then came the ABBA songs. In 2008, Meryl traded the designer suits for denim overalls in Mamma Mia. The critics were stunned, but the audience was electrified. A woman who had mastered Polish trauma and nuclear whistleblowing was now dancing on a Greek pier, belting out pop hits with a raw, unforced energy. It was a $600 million victory. As one critic noted, the greatest actor in American movies has finally become a movie star. She followed that joy with the bone-chilling Sister Aloysius in Doubt, a performance so rigid and pale she was called the scariest nun of all time. By 2011, she took on the daunting and exciting challenge of Margaret Thatcher in The Iron Lady. Meryl spent hours in the House of Commons, obsessing over the Prime Minister's elocution and the specific pitch of her voice. While the film divided the UK, Meryl's performance was undeniable, earning her a 3rd Oscar and cementing her status as the industry's sovereign. She moved seamlessly from the culinary warmth of Julia Child to the Wicked Witch routine of a grieving matriarch in August, Osage County. The 2000s saw her transform into the first female newspaper publisher, Katharine Graham, in Spielberg's The Post, delivering a portrait of a woman liberating herself that felt acutely moving. Then came the move to television. In 2019, she joined the cast of Big Little Lies, playing a passive-aggressive grandmother. For the first time in her 50-year career, Meryl agreed to the part without reading a single page of the script. She trusted the story. Meryl has always guarded the line between the studio and the sanctuary of her home. For over 45 years, she and sculptor Don Gummer stood as a rare symbol of stability in a town known for temporary vows. She is the mother of 4 exceptional children: Henry Wolfe, musician, Mamie Gummer, Grace Gummer, and Louisa Jacobson, each of whom pursues their own artistic endeavors with unique talents and styles. Her children frequently attend together at large occasions, proudly carrying on their mother's legacy without being dominated by her presence. In 2023, a quiet truth emerged. Meryl and Don had been living separate lives for more than 6 years. There was no scandal, no public friction. They simply transitioned into a new chapter with the same poise that has defined their entire marriage. Meryl is currently delighting fans as the struggling but hopeful Loretta Durkin in Only Murders in the Building, a role that earned her yet another string of nominations. She is reprising her iconic role as Miranda Priestley in The Devil Wears Prada 2, and has signed on to portray musician Joni Mitchell in an upcoming biopic. She often says that every film is a new chance to say something honest. By 2026, the name Meryl Streep has become more than just a credit on a movie poster. It is a benchmark for human excellence. To look at her career is to look at a mountain of gold that no other artist in history has ever climbed. She holds a record-shattering 21 Academy Award nominations and 32 Golden Globe nods, numbers that sound more like a legendary myth than a professional resume. From the Presidential Medal of Freedom to the AFI Life Achievement Award, her shelf is crowded with every honor a nation can bestow. President Obama once said she represents the full range of the human experience. And for 50 years, that is exactly what she gave us. She was the chameleon who could speak in any tongue and inhabit any soul. The woman who took our broken hearts and turned them into art. After decades of being the industry's sovereign, the Ice Queen has finally decided that the most important stories aren't the ones written for the screen. At 76, Meryl Streep has stopped performing for the critics and started speaking for her soul. In the quiet sanctuary of her later career, she has finally allowed the world a glimpse into the most guarded corner of her life, her bond with Robert Redford. Bob was the kind of person who made everyone around him better, she shared. To the world, Robert Redford was the hunk, the golden boy with the blue eyes that made a generation of women want to live in the America he represented. But Meryl saw past the gorgeous facade. She saw a man of a rare kind of dignity and a searing, quiet intelligence. She admits now that on the set of Out of Africa, she didn't find a co-star, she found a mirror. We had this unspoken understanding on set, Meryl recalled. It wasn't about the scripts or the accolades. It was about the love of the craft itself. She described how they would spend hours in the tall grass, not discussing lines, but discussing character motivations and the raw truth of the human condition. Bob taught her a lesson that no school could, that success isn't measured by box office numbers, but by the integrity you carry when the cameras stop rolling. He was her lion in winter. Meryl confesses that even at the height of her own power, she felt a profound sense of safety when she was in his orbit. He was the one who could make the Ice Queen flinch, the only partner who could match her precision with his pure, unforced instinct. She watched him build Sundance, not as a monument to himself, but as a blessing for the hundreds of filmmakers who would follow. He taught her that an artist's true legacy isn't the trophies on the shelf, but the hearts they touch and the causes they champion. There is a specific, heartbreaking nostalgia in her voice when she talks about him now. She remembers the way they were, two titans who shared a bond so intense it required a 40-year silence to protect it. He was more than a partner, she whispered. He was the anchor I didn't know I needed. As we look at Meryl Streep today, we realize that her tribute to Robert Redford isn't just about a man, it's about a standard of living. She is teaching us that the greatest loves are the ones that change us, the ones that force us to be more kind, more honest, and more human. Robert Redford blessed our earth with his heart and soul, and Meryl has finally given him the final cut he deserves. He wasn't just a legend of the silver screen. He was a legend of character. If this look into the silent frequency between Meryl and Bob moved you, please like the video and subscribe. We will continue to pull back the curtain on the real hearts behind the Hollywood gold, ensuring that the truths of our icons are never forgotten.